Today, we're turning our attention to the deadly driving bill, which aims to change the list of prohibited substances to a broader definition of any impairing drug. I'm Jody Kenny, and joining us on this Sunday is the state senator Christopher Ryan. He's talking about closing the legal loopholes with impaired driving. Plus, the senator also discusses his role as chair for the New York Conference of Mayors and its plans for the bill. And later, Niagara County Sheriff Michael Filicetti is also with us. He tells us how this legislation will help the police department improve road safety. All that and so much more happening now on In Focus. Let's begin today's conversation with State Senator Chris Ryan. Thank you so much for joining us here on In Focus. It's your first time. We're so glad to have you.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. So, thank you for having me.
So as you know, we're going to get right into the topics. You've got a lot going on as the deadly driving bill is currently in the Senate floor. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what that legislation would do?
So, well, what it would do is help protect New York motorists from unsafe condition drug driving. So what specifically the drug would do would broaden the scope. So we're currently off of a list, if you will, if it's in state law. What that does is basically removes a list and defines it as impaired or intoxicated. And obviously we'll be able to tell if people are driving impaired, because there's so many substances out there that aren't defined in law that make these roads very, very, very unsafe. And we're trying to change that.
So that leads me to my next question. What is the extent of what is considered drugs? Well,
it basically broadens the scope. So you could test for anything. If you were under a synthetic drug, or it's nitrous oxide or fentanyl, currently under the state statute, that is not defined in state law. So you basically, we're going to try to enforce that. We're going to try to change the law so for better enforcement. And because so many people are now driving around impaired or under the influence of so many different substances that are new every day, that they change, and fentanyl and everything, and it's just we're going to try to prosecute them. We're going to try to make the roadway safe.
What about controlled substances?
Controlled substances. Well, in what?
And more like prescribed drugs, things like that. Is that something that would fall under this as well?
Yeah, we do have a provision for that with basically safeguards in that. So, yes, there is a provisions, because that was brought up and it's a concern, and it's a true concern, but that's not the intent of the bill. The intent of the bill is to prosecute and go after the synthetics, the illicit, and all the drugs that make these roadways much, much more unsafe. And right now, you can't test for those unless there's a serious crash or there's a motor vehicle accident or, unfortunately, in certain sense, fatalities. Then you can go and test, but you wouldn't know that without that unfortunate tragedy happening. So we're trying to prevent that, and that also, we're trying to deter people from doing that. It's also sort of a recidivism, right? The recidivism issue too. If we're able to catch them and we're able to stop that from happening and deter it from happening in the first place, maybe we could prevent another tragedy.
I'm thinking also, law enforcement may be confused on, how to enforce things. How would this change how current law enforcement conducts its protocol then?
Well, kind of in a certain sense, the law enforcement's hands are right now kind of tied. Right. So because if it's not, we have the mechanism for alcohol, and it's very, very clear. And, there's a procedure for that. But when somebody's on some other drug, whether it's nitrous oxide or fentanyl or any sort of synthetic, there isn't really a mechanism for that. So it helps law enforcement. It helps law enforcement do their jobs. It helps our, be able to prosecute these crimes and stop it from happening again. But it also makes the general public safer. That's what we're really trying to do, because so many people are driving around on these types of substances that we can't legally enforce.
What kind of impact do you think that this bill would have? Because I'm thinking, right now there is that gray area. It may make things more clear for law enforcement and for people who may, consider getting behind the wheel.
Oh, well, I think it's going to have a a big impact across the safety from, from Long Island to Western New York. Our roads are unsafer because of the amount of people. I mean, these are statistics too. There's statistical data to back up all of these, I guess, assertions that people are driving around on so many substances. So I think being able to deter that, being able to catch that from happening, and then deter that future behavior, I think we'll be making the road safer.
Could you talk a little bit about how this could help close some legal loopholes?
Well, it will close the legal loophole by broadening the definition of impaired and intoxication. It not necessarily will close the loophole, but it will make it easier to enforce. We will be able to enforce, we will be able to determine that somebody is driving under the influence and or is impaired, drugged, or driving around drugged, and we'll be able to catch them, and we'll be able to prosecute them, and we'll be able to deter them from doing that again.
Could you talk a little bit about, oftentimes these types of legislation come at the result of a tragedy. Could you talk a little bit about, how this came to your attention and why, you're so passionate about this issue?
Well, I'll tell you, we had a forum down in New York City, and many of the advocates that were I think we have up to a lot of broad support, bipartisan support. I think I have at least 32 co-sponsors. But yeah, this bill, it's passionate because you hear the stories of these people, parents or loved ones that have lost somebody in a motor vehicle tragedy, a fatality, and somebody was behind the wheel, and they were on a substance that wasn't just alcohol. And we kind of look at it and say, well, how do we continue to let that happen? And if we can legislate something to stop that from happening, the stories are very, very, very powerful, and people's lives are changed in a bad way forever.
You're so right. We're going to take a quick break, but I know you said that you'd stick around for a second block. Is that okay? Can we keep you around for another?
Of course.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah,
State Senator Chris Ryan. We're going to take a quick break. Still to come, we learn more about the New York State Conference of Mayors and Municipal Officials and the issues the committee is facing. Stay with us. Welcome back to In Focus. We are with State Senator Chris Ryan. We appreciate you sticking around for another block. All right, so let's now pivot to the New York State Conference of Mayors. You're the chair of that committee. What kind of work do you do there?
So, well, it's a cities to committee. So basically, every city that in New York that's not New York City, and we pass legislation. It's helpful. We work in a lot of collaboration with a lot of our mayors, but also a lot of our villages. And so NICOM is a great partner, but we're just trying to do, funding. I guess that's what we do. Funding. We're trying to, we pass through with the AIM funding, and it's a busy committee. It's a good committee, and I enjoy chairing it.
You recently discussed the deadly driving bill with your colleagues at NICOM. What was the overall consensus among your peers about this legislation?
Yeah, good, really good. I think we have a lot of, and it's a problem, right? So those that are, the mayors are in the ground level of what's happening in the cities understand this. It's a big problem. We have people that are, again, driving around getting behind the wheel, impaired by a number of illegal substances. And we're trying to enforce that. But it's been great feedback because obviously when you're the mayor and in the city, you want your city streets to be safe, and any legislation that makes them safer, they'll be supportive of.
So true. I'm wondering, because there's always another side to this issue, are you hearing any pushback or critiques about it?
Well, no, I mean, there was some pushback, but I think we put in the safeguards of obviously the emergency, or it would be the prescription drugs, and we're trying to amend that. We just want to make sure we pass a bill. We want to make sure that we get this done. We want to make sure that we have the ability for law enforcement to close the loopholes, and make it street safer.
Are there some other issues, top issues, that are currently being discussed or addressed by the committee that you'd like to talk about today?
Well, through the city's two committee. Yeah, well, we spoke of, I think certainly top of mind for many of the mayors in the cities across is obviously road maintenance. Arterial maintenance is a big issue. The safe water infrastructure is what we call safe water infrastructure action program. So we're trying to make sure clean water. We're really trying to help with that funding, and of course we're obviously, and I also have another bill, 6956B, that will help, because staffing is a big issue too with some of our with the cities and staffing. I think staffing is an issue everywhere, recruitment and retainment. But we're trying to. I believe we have a really good bill, and that increases the threshold. So currently, retirees carve a cap at $35,000. We're trying to raise that so that we can retain people and bring people back to the workforce and help out. And that's been very well received.
Oh, that's great. I know the mayors probably have a huge list of concerns and come to you quite frequently with, advocacy and trying to get you to, push forth something that can help their communities, especially the smaller communities.
Yeah, and funding always comes up, right? So that's the big one. AIM funding. There was in the budget, I think it's $50 million, but we're trying to push that. We're trying to go for a long-term, but because it's hard, right? Whether you're running a big city or a small city or a medium-sized city, planning for the future and revenue is how you plan. And we're trying to make sure that that's a little bit more stable, define that, and make sure that it's, I guess we can't keep doing it every year. Trying to make sure that if it's planned out.
And you were talking about keeping people in communities, and that kind of led me to think about the housing crisis that we hear about all across upstate New York, and the fact that while we want to keep people and maybe even grow our communities, housing has always been an issue. Is that something that you hear in this committee? I'm not quite sure.
Well, we hear it. Well, it's an issue, right? I mean, it's an issue in every community. We're dealing with, especially in my district, we're going to need a lot of housing with the big chip fab plants. So that's certainly on everybody's mind. Look, we don't do it. We have a housing committee, so that's a little bit kind of outside of our scope, but it's all part of the same issues, addressing the issues and addressing the concerns of the community leaders and the mayors, and say how we're going to do this. So we're going to be able to meet the demand. We have to do, site plan, this approval, that approval, it's seeker. So it's all kind of interconnected, but a little bit more on the housing side is with the housing committee.
What are some of your top goals with NICOM for this year?
Well, trying to make sure we have a reliable continuing funding source every year so that they can better plan, the mayors in the respective cities. Road funding, because everything we can do to help, it's true, right? I don't represent the city of Syracuse, but every city of Syracuse, they always say, but City Fulton, City of Speak, but everybody, there's a lot of tax exempt properties. And I don't think, and we have to be understanding of that. So they're going to need some help. They need help every year. So we're going to try to help them. Obviously the stormwater issues, lead issues, clean water issues, and help with staffing. Any way that we can help with the recruiting and the retaining of employees is what we hear a lot.
Right, and
that's what we're going to try to accomplish through the committee.
Yeah, and when you're talking about infrastructure, I stop and think about Micron being such a big project, especially for your community and the impact it can have. So we definitely need to keep people in the state because we're going to have those jobs, right?
We are going to have those jobs, thousands of them, thousands and thousands of those jobs. But housing is a big issue, and I'm hopeful too. And at the same time, I think we're also going to see a significant population growth and increase north of up in Oswego County, and we're really trying to help plan. Where I'm working with the towns and the municipalities in Oswego County up there so we can meet that moment. There's going to be some infrastructure improvements that we need. It's not always sexy, but we got to talk about sewers, infrastructure, clean water, and obviously electricity. So all of those things really play in. But if we're really gonna, we're doing it. They're cutting down trees. They broke ground. It's happening, and I'm happy that it's happening. But thousands of jobs, and potentially they're saying up to potentially even 40,000 new people coming into the community. Wow. We're going to need infrastructure plan for that. But wetlands regulation, zoning issues, seeker issues, but also utilities.
So true. Right. Yeah, there's a lot to come. State Senator Chris Ryan, I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you on In Focus.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, take care. All right, In Focus, we'll be right back after this. Welcome back to In Focus as we discuss the deadly driving legislation. We're joined now by Niagara County Sheriff Michael Filicetti. And thank you so much for joining us here on In Focus. Glad to have you.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Okay, so we just finished talking to State Senator Chris Ryan about this, and he made some interesting points about why the bill is so important. Can you start off by telling us what your initial thoughts were?
I think this is imperative legislation. We see tragedy on a regular basis, as far as drunk driving goes, and impaired driving by drugs. And legislation like this works to close loopholes that I think are very dangerous. For instance, the initial piece to this bill that I think is a really huge piece is eliminating a list of specific drugs that, really ties the hands of our deputies when they're making arrests.
Right. Yeah. I was thinking about that, and I'm figuring that this is probably something that any law enforcement agency would want to be passed in order to have some clear, defined ways to be able to address this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I would think any law enforcement agency would want to support this. Again, people are actually getting away with driving while impaired under substances that aren't included on the public health list, and they're still impaired. But somehow they get away with doing it because that specific drug is not listed on the public health list. And as we know, drugs are changing consistently. There's new variations coming out of synthetic type drugs, things of that nature. And, we can't keep up with it on a list. We need to just have legislation that says if you're impaired by some type of drug, you're going to be fair game to be arrested for driving with ability impaired by those drugs.
Right. And I'm thinking that also that this might be helpful for future traffic safety. Could you talk a little bit about the importance of traffic safety in general, but also specifically to this issue?
Sure. Again, I think this legislation gives us a little bit more authority, gets rid of some of the loopholes. When you look it could involve a personal injury accident where our hands may be a little tied now. This would authorize court orders on personal injury accidents. So it's really focused around safety, and it's really focused around us being able to enforce the law more efficiently. Again, we see tragedies on a regular basis caused by alcohol. I can tell you we have a significant number of crashes each year that involve people that are either under the influence of alcohol or some type of drug. And it makes it very unsafe for others on the roadways here in Niagara County.
From a numbers perspective, about how many estimated impaired drivers are actually caught versus having been let go because of the current law? Maybe you might not have numbers, but you might have a general idea.
One thing I could tell you number-wise is the number of driving while ability impaired by drug arrests have gone up for our agency over the years. And I think it's a combination of two things. We now have drug recognition experts that are certified to be able to identify those individuals. And I think people using some type of drug has gone up as well. So, that although our total number of arrests for alcohol and drugs has stayed relatively flat, there's been a shift to where we're seeing more people arrested for impairment by some type of drug.
That's interesting. Assuming that it passes, once it's passed, how would enforcement begin to roll out?
So we would update policies with the sheriff's office. Certainly, again, letting all of our deputies know that that specific list of drugs is no longer specific. If they're impaired by any type of drug that doesn't allow them to drive the vehicle properly because they're impaired by drugs, that would be training that would go out. There's other sections of this law that's proposed. If it goes into effect as it's prescribed, we would offer training to all of our road deputies to ensure that they know all sections of the proposed legislation.
Do you see any downside to this legislation? There's always that secondary look at issues, and especially legislation. There's always an effort that wants to improve it or change it. Or do you see any downsides or any blind spots to this legislation?
I really look at this legislation as it's been a long time coming. I don't see any downside. When it comes to traffic safety, it's pretty clear cut to me that this is going to help us enforce the law better, and it's going to help us keep our roadways safer here in Niagara County. And I really do not see any downside to what they're trying to accomplish with this proposed legislation.
I have like 30 seconds left. I just kind of wanted to get your thought process on how this could really provide some support and relief to people who have experienced either a traffic accident or the loss of a loved one as a result of, driving while ability impaired. This legislation could be key.
It could be a very pivotal moment here for people. We've seen tragedies where we want to make those arrests, where we want to tell the families that they're going to see justice come from what happened. And nothing will ever replace a lost family member or help them get through a tragedy. But I think it gives them some comfort to know that we're able to hold that individual accountable.
Niagara County Sheriff Michael Filicetti, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate hearing your perspective.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching this edition of In Focus. I'm Jody Kenny. We appreciate you spending your Sunday with us.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. To keep up with important issues impacting our communities and hear more conversations with the people who are shaping the future, subscribe to our channel. You can also download our app or find Spectrum News on your TV for balanced, in-depth political coverage and more.